how do you get rid of the stress that so many of us carry with us?
Well, there are three keys, and you have named one of the three major ones, which is three P's: posse, purpose, and play. So the purpose is you're living your dream. This is ideal for living my dream. I want to help people live younger, longer. The most important thing in reducing stress is having a posse, friends who support you. As we get older, especially if you retire, you lose those work friends, you lose your school friends. So it is making the effort to call and generate those friendships again. The third thing is play. And whether it is with your grandkids or with your kids or in squash or pickleball, you can't focus on anything but the game because it's going to get you if you don't. So you focus on that, that clears your mind.
Walker & Dunlop brings you insights for life. Unique perspectives from impactful leaders. This is the Walker Webcast with Willy Walker.
Welcome to another Walker Webcast. It is my great joy to have my friend Mike Roizen join me, Dr. Mike Roizen, I should say, join me once again for a Walker Webcast. As I said to you when we were just coming on, I haven't done as many of these with you as I have with our mutual friend Peter Linneman, but I will tell you that I learn as much from my conversations with you as I do from my conversations with Peter about the economy. And to be honest with you, while Peter's insights on the economy are extremely important to all of our listeners and to the commercial real estate world, the stuff that you focus on has a far greater impact on the lives we live and the length of the lives we live. So it's a real joy to have you with me again.
It's absolutely my privilege, and that's awful. That's saying an awful lot, you know. Peter, Peter is great. So I'm totally honored.
Well, I'm going to see Peter tomorrow, and he texted me today and said let's go for a walk. And I know that Peter's daily walks are 100% due to your counsel and input to Peter's lifestyle as it relates to getting his 10,000 steps a day.
You know, it was a Japanese pedometer manufacturer who had that idea, but maybe he had the data because it's absolutely borne out. Whether you look at cognitive functioning or cardiac functioning or all-cause mortality, that 10,000 steps is the minimum you can do for maximum benefit.
So, Mike, let's dive into, I want to start with real age because your real age is dramatically lower than the age that is calculated by a 365-day-a-year calendar. What's your real age today, Mike?
My calendar age is 80 and my real age is about 57.6.
And a lot of, I mean, there seems to be just this incredible focus and amount of money being put into longevity and wellness today. And you are as informed a source as anyone. And one of the things that I love about you, being the practicing physician that you have been throughout your career and all that you've done at the Cleveland Clinic from a wellness standpoint, you come at this not for a, if you will, an Instagram post that sounds like the greatest fad of the day, but you come at this from a true science-based background and all the research that you have both published yourself as well as what you read and implement. There seem to be a lot of different themes out there today, Mike. There's everything from peptides and people taking IVs to wearables. And you know, I wear a Whoop strap and watch my daily health through a Whoop strap. There are surgeries and oh, that's great. I love it. Go Whoop. I'm actually, I always have to disclose that I'm an investor in Whoop. And so as I push Whoop, I got to be careful that people know that I'm an investor in the company.
I am not. So I don't have to disclose that I'm not.
Well, given how it is performed, I think at some point you will wish you were, or you probably when it goes public, you will be able to be. But as you look right now, what's the most, there are two things to it. What's the most exciting area right now as it relates to longevity and health? And then frame that in back to what I know Mike Roizen stands for, which is not the fly by night trend, not something you can do tomorrow that's going to improve your health in the long term, but the back to the basic six and the things that you need to do on a day-to-day basis to take care of your own health. But start on the excitement and what you're seeing out there today, Mike.
So when we wrote the Great Age Reboot, and when I was on your show with the Great Age Reboot, there are 14 areas of research into the mechanism of aging, what causes aging, that we're showing in each and two animal species that they could turn the equivalent of a 90-year-old person into the equivalent of human 40. And that's really, I mean, when you think of it, it makes AI look as a small disruptor if you're going to be able to be younger than your kids. It's emotionally tough to capture that. Well, in the last 2 years, all of those have progressed, and now 5 of those are in human trials. And when you say 5 of those are in human trials, within, with 14 shots on goal, but 5 in the immediate shots, it looks like we're going to get a likely breakthrough. So the most exciting thing is we're learning a lot more about the mechanism of aging due to the exponential reduction in cost of understanding the human genome. And let me, Joe, go and relate that in Peter Linneman's terms and your terms. When the human genome was first uncovered, it cost $3 billion and 10 years. That's now $40 and 6 hours. So an 8 to 12,000 fold reduction in the time and cost of doing science. The second part is the most exciting of the current things, I think, is on brain wellness, because obviously your brain is what you are. And what we're learning, even last week, studies on tau 217, if you will, ratio of 2 of the tau 217, one unphosphorylated to the phosphorylated, predicted when we can tell each person when they will develop Alzheimer's disease, if and when they will develop Alzheimer's disease. And that's modifiable now. It's modifiable by 40 things that each person can do. And one of those, if you will, one of those is one of the age-relating things, that is therapeutic plasma exchange, where you can literally reverse the cognitive dysfunction and prevent it as well. Another one is the brain games, freeze frame and double decision. When you do crossword puzzles or if you will, even doing, any game on your computer, you think you're improving your brain, but it turns out not. The brain is much like the heart or skeletal muscle or your bones. You have to injure it to turn on the repair genes. And the only way apparently we injure our brains is forcing it to work at maximum capacity, which is the, if you will, the speed of processing games called in double decision and freeze frame. A month ago, almost exactly, came out with their 20-year data on preventing dementia. And just 18 hours of practice over 10 years, that's what, an hour and a half or 2 hours a year, reduced dementia by 40+%. This is randomized controlled trial, very well done study. And so and every one of the people tuned in can afford to either get a speed of processing games free or get the actual games that showed that they not only decrease dementia, but they increase acetylcholine production by this repair mechanism in the key brain areas, executive function and memory.
So
So
what do you do in that process? Do you go to a studio and take a test? How do you get your brain running at that rate?
you this is I have no I wish I did. I have no financial interest in Brain HQ either. Whoop should put it on their app for free or as part of a subscription, but you can subscribe to Brain HQ, or you go to Speed of Processing Games at Brain HQ, and the games they tested were freeze frame and double decision, and they tested them against people doing solitaire and the other speed, if you will, the other games on the computer. Those were the control group. And compared to the control group, same group of people, age 73 to 93, a 40+% decrease in dementia from just 18 hours of practice over 10 years, the first 10 years, or 25% if you get lazy and just do 10 hours of practice.
It's interesting about your comment about it doesn't heal unless you break it. It makes me think, Mike, about I was reading in Peter Attia's book, Outlive, about lifting weights, and the fact that there is cognitive improvement from weightlifting, but only if you are doing very high weight. And so, in other words, you need to
A
do maximum.
high weight for you, not in other words, each person is individualized for high weight.
Understood, yes. But to 75 to 90% of your threshold weight for you as an individual. So obviously, we're not talking about Willy Walker trying to bench press 250 pounds. But the point being is that if my bench press is 150 pounds, I ought to be doing 75 to 90% of that to be able to get the cognitive improvement from it. And one of the things that I have
But
struggled with
you
on that one is that I don't want to bulk up. I just want to use my muscles. So I do lower weight on higher reps than trying to bulk up by doing higher weights and fewer reps. But I won't pick up, per what I read in Atia's book, I won't pick up the cognitive benefits of doing that off of higher weights. And so I just hearing you talk about these cognitive tests of not just sort of keeping your mind active and reading the paper, but having to really put it into kind of the gauntlet, if you will, in high stress environments is very interesting about how the body works, how the body grows, and how the body retains its capabilities.
Probably everyone in commercial real estate puts it into that gauntlet right now, if you will, from what I understand. My knowledge of that field is little, but um, the point is that when you injure yourself, for example, jumping 20 times morning and night on a hard surface, injure your bone. You turn on a gene in that bone that makes that bone stronger. So remember, someone said, and I wish I can remember who said the quote is, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Well, that's true for muscle. So the reason you build muscle is you injure it when you do that 8 to 12 repetition at 75% or so of maximum capacity. And then you turn on a gene, that's why you have a day in between. You turn on a gene that repairs it so it's stronger, and that's the same thing. Now, muscle has something extra, and we think it is for muscle memory. That is, you also turn on a gene in the muscle that produces a small protein. The name isn't particularly, but it's a Roizen. Um, MIT and Mass General tried to patent it at the same day as UCSF tried to patent it. So that's why we know a lot about it. But a Roizen goes across the blood-brain barrier and turns on a gene in your brain that produces brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor that builds the memory center. And there's only, Willie, you understand this. There's only one organ in the body where size matters, and that's your hippocampus, which is your memory center of the brain.
So, Mike, as we're talking about the brain, a couple of the other sort of trends that have come out since the two of us spoke were one sauna and the other cold plunge. And sauna, from the reading that I have done, and most of the studies have been in Scandinavian countries, but people who do sauna for 20 minutes a day on a consistent basis have shown that they diminish the rate of both dementia as well as Alzheimer's significantly. Am I reading those research reports properly? And is that something that you and your team have looked at as it relates to how people can sort of hack into longevity on brain health?
You're right, and I should give credit. There are 10 of us who are on the scientific advisory board of what we call forlongevity.com, and we go over all the data, review it periodically. And so sauna and cold plunge both work on the same mechanism. So we think you can do one or the other and get the full benefit and not both. Um, but they both preserve heat shock protein or turn on heat shock protein. Don't have to know the name, obviously. But what it does is it protects your proteins from damage. So the reason that therapeutic plasma exchange works to reverse um, long COVID symptoms, COVID vaccine injury, reverse Alzheimer's dementia, reverse early dementia and Alzheimer's in randomized controlled trials is because the proteins it gets rid of are missignaling. And what cold plunge and sauna do is they envelop your proteins to protect them from from being affected by other things that will cause them to missignal. So it is the same mechanism. And so, Willie, if you like sauna and not cold plunge, just do one or the other. That may be self-serving on my part because I enjoy sauna and cold plunges are not fun for me.
I have to tell you, I do both on a very consistent basis, and am fortunate to have both in my home. But I will tell you, Mike, when I first started doing the cold plunge, I thought I had to be a macho man, and so I dropped the temperature down to the low 40s. And as I would walk by the cold plunge after working out, I would find any excuse on the face of the earth to walk by it, and I'm too busy. I got to get going, and I found myself constantly finding an excuse not to jump in. And then I heard a podcast by Tony Robbins where Tony Robbins said he cold plunges every day at 56 degrees. And I texted Tony and I said, Tony, you do 56 degrees? He says, yeah, all you got to do is do it. He said, it's to wake up the body. And to your point, it's to protect the proteins. But he said, all the studies say that you don't have to be in the 30s or low 40s to be able to get the benefits of cold plunging. So I have mine today at about 48 degrees and it's plenty cold, but at the same time, I can do it and I don't avoid it like the
So
plague.
Tony was exactly right. I got
Yeah.
to tell you, Tony was exactly right. The data would say 1 degree below 57 is enough, and it's 17 minutes a week gets you the full benefit
Oh,
at that.
that's great to know. So, Mike, one of the other things out of your research that's very clear and kind of staying on the brain, and then we'll move to diet and we'll move to sleep and all the other things that I love to talk to you about. But one of the greatest agers by your research is stress. And
It is the greatest ager, not
it
one
is
of.
the
It
greatest
is
ager.
the.
Okay. So, given that we are in challenging times. We've got a war going on in the Middle East right now. We have an economy that feels very strong to some and feels very weak to others. And I have a son who's graduating from college, and he and I had dinner 2 weeks ago, Mike, and he turned to me and he said, I'm kind of stressed, Dad, about going into the workforce and kind of getting on with my life. And then he said, but in comparison to all the stress that you carry running your company, I kind of don't, I can't kind of be that stressed. And I looked at him and I said, well, Jack, I've got 35 years of dealing with my stress. You're just coming into the stressful part of your life. So don't worry. You have every right to feel and carry that stress. The one other thing I said to him, Mike, which I stole from my guest last week, Sahil Bloom, where he reminds people as it relates to their lives and the ups and downs of one's life is that if you're living your dream, there's nothing to get upset about. In other words, like I live my dream every day. I wanted to build this company to be the size and scale that it is. And while clearly there are curveballs that I get and ups and downs and days that are great and days that seem less great, at the end of the day, as long as I'm pursuing my dream and living my dream, what's to complain about? And it was fun because my son Jack was sort of like, I said, you went to the college you wanted to go to, you studied what you wanted to study, and you're heading out into the workforce to go do what you want to do. There should be no stress there, buddy. And he was like, that's a great way of looking at it, Dad. But anyway, on stress, how do we get it out of our system? How do we, when we're confronted with all that's going on, what are the things that you do personally that can be helpful tips to people to sort of say, you meditate, you go on walks, how do you get rid of the stress that so many of us carry with us?
Well, there are three keys, and you have named one of the three major ones, which is three P's: posse, purpose, and play. So the purpose is you're living your dream. I get to this is ideal for living my dream. I want to help people live younger, longer. And so this is perfect. So thank you. Um, the things you can do I call 6 people who are friends every Sunday because the data from long ago in the Whitehall studies in the 1950s has been reaffirmed multiple times. The most important thing in reducing stress is having a posse, friends who support you. And as we get older, especially if you retire, you lose those work friends, you lose your school friends. So it is making the effort to call and generate those friendships again. The third thing is play. And whether it is with your grandkids or with your kids or in squash or pickleball, squash is my game. So whether it is squash or pickleball or whatever it is, that play, that focusing on another thing. When you're in a pickleball court or on a squash court or a tennis court, you can't focus on anything but the game because it's going to get you if you don't. So you focus on that, that clears your mind. All of the other techniques, whether it is meditation or resistance breathing, I should have brought that out. One of the things I do every day is 10 double breaths. So the second most important muscle in our body that we often don't strengthen is our diaphragm. And so if you breathe through a device that limits your breath in, looks crazy. So I'm going to do it. And you have a straw out here. A double breath through a straw, and you narrow that straw orifice. It's called an inspiratory resistance trainer. And doing 10 times, but putting your finger on your belly button so you're focusing on your finger. So when you do that, your finger should go out. That most of our fingers go in because we breathe with our chest and not our diaphragm. That's why you want to strengthen your diaphragm. It's strengthening your lung functioning because you're actually teaching your diaphragm to move down. So you do it. If it moves in, don't worry. Practice getting it to move out. You will be able to. And as you narrow the orifice of the inspiratory resistance trainer, you strengthen your diaphragm, and so you get it's a double, it's a twofer. I like, you get 2 benefits. You not only meditate or get focus on stress relief by doing that, but also you in fact strengthen your diaphragm. And I like to say driving in traffic is one of my most stressful things. When someone cuts me off, and what I do is I put my finger in my belly button and double deep breath. It's a much better thing to do with my finger than what I used to do. So
So, Mike, when you talk about the posse and relationships, clearly from the Harvard longevity study, it's very, very clear that the social networks that people have are one of the key drivers of longevity. But there are a lot of people who are using AI to create a one-to-one relationship with AI bots and with their Grok friend or their Anthropic friend or whatever you want to call it. Any research or anyone looking at whether those types of relationships are similarly stimulating from a socialization standpoint to just you and your 8 friends that you call every Sunday?
Yeah, well, you're in, I call different ones. So I add to my potential network every Sunday. But you're in Philadelphia, I think, or at
I'm going
least
there tomorrow to see Peter, but
least
today
if
I'm in
you're
DC.
walking with Peter, you probably are,
Yeah.
will be. So at the University of Pennsylvania, they have a large group that's studying this on what AI friends do. And so we don't have data on it yet. But I don't think, and this is an interesting concept, is the support, is the posse support because you know they will come to your aid if you need it, or is it just the feeling of that, whether they will or not, if they're a AI friend? I don't know the answer to that, but we'll get the answer within a year or two from the University of Pennsylvania or other people who are probably studying it as well.
I think it's a fascinating concept. And quite honestly, given the value to me of my friendships, I'm sort of hopeful that it comes back and says you don't get from the chat bot what you get from the human friendships. I mean, it feels like the chat bot's going to take a lot of things away from us. Keeping the importance of the personal relationships, at least from my perspective, would be really great. But the
I think
one
that's
other piece
true.
to it.
I think that's true because I think it is that we have to know that some of those friends, that is the posse part of the friendship, will come to your aid, will be there when you need them. And so I think that's an important component.
Yeah. The one other piece to it, though, is that there are clearly people like you and me that have our own posses, and then there are plenty of people who don't. And one of the things that you write about and talk about is tips for people who might be feeling a little bit isolated. And so the one thing there is that clearly, if there is some therapeutic effect of having a chatbot who you engage with on a day-to-day basis, for certain people who are more isolated than others and don't have the luxury of a cohort or a posse to go to, it could be extremely beneficial if it turns out to be so.
Yes, but I think I think it may be somewhat beneficial, but again, whether you're joining a club or just taking a new class, whether the class is online or not, you find that we have at the Cleveland Clinic we have this wonderful system called social prescribing. So if someone is lonely or has loneliness, we can actually social prescribe them to something they want to do. And one of my favorite patients, if you will, I still see patients on Thursdays and Fridays, and one of my favorites was an art teacher, an artist who came back to Cleveland to care for his mom. His mom died, and he had totally focused on her, had no friends. So we used social prescribing, hooked him up with a student art class. And now he teaches, so the students became his initial posse, and then the other teachers and the other artists. And so he's now got and he's taken up bike riding, and he's now got a group of bike riders who also are as part of his posse. So social prescribing is a great thing. That is, find another group to join.
I'm certain that you just sit there and see what he is doing today and see the years adding on to his life as he sits there and engages in the way that you're describing it.
And he sees them too. I mean, that's the great thing.
Yeah. Um, Mike, let's talk about food for a moment. I've changed my life a lot since I got to know you. And one of the things that I have had a little bit of a challenging time. I eat a lot earlier today than I used to because of you, but I don't always eat when the sun is up, which is something that you do. Talk for a moment about some of the helpful tips as it relates to food of both what to eat and when to eat that people listening in can benefit from.
So I'll get to there are only five foods that aren't healthy for us. Simple sugars, added syrups, and simple carbohydrates or strict carbohydrates. That is things without if you will, fiber with them. Those raise your blood sugar fast. And the value, if you will, we're now learning, I'll break and just say something weird for a second and then come back. Remember, Oprah had this great show. You get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car. And it saved Pontiac for a number of years. But in any case, we now in executive health say, you get a statin and a GLP-1, you get a statin and a GLP-1, you get a statin, whether they need it from a standpoint of cholesterol or whether they need it from obesity, because the side effects are so good. And the side effects of the GLP-1s are to do something metabolically that lowers that sugar effect. So it is simple sugars in your blood, change your proteins and how they function. And that's what the problem is the simple sugar, simple, like that is added syrups, simple carbohydrates, red and processed red meat, and then fried food. If you eliminate those five, virtually everything else is fine. And you want to find food you love that loves you back. So food is a relationship like a marriage. You wouldn't marry someone who's going to kill you. You shouldn't eat food that's trying to kill you every day. So just avoiding those five foods, everything else, you'll find something you love. The timing that has been shown repeatedly is that if you finish eating 3 hours before you try to go to sleep, one, you'll sleep much better. Two, you'll have more energy the next day. And three, you won't feel as hungry, so you'll actually lose weight better if that's a goal, or stay thin better. And so whether it is the process of, quote, fasting, meaning you have a longer period without food, whether that holds because you're reducing your calories or you've got a longer period before you go to sleep, we don't know why it is effective, but it is that 3 hours, you want to finish 3 hours before you lay down, you go to sleep, which is why I say eat when the sun is up, or only eat when the sun is up.
And on the fasting front, I don't think you don't consider if you have dinner at 6 p.m. and don't have breakfast until 9 a.m. the next day, that's not a form of fasting. You do full fasts where you don't eat for an extended period of time, correct?
Well, I do 14 or 16 hours a day, but the key is I do what is called the fasting mimicking diet 5 days a month. A wonderful research head of gerontology at USC, Walter Longo and his group, accidentally started to find out the benefits of this. I think it was in 2017, may have been 2015. I've been doing it ever since. So I read the abstract the day it came out by accident. It was, he said 1,000 calories day one, 750 the next 4 days. And initially it was for the animals, for initially in the first human trial, I should say, it was a tomato corn-based soup. And I still go with that. But it was initially, they did it in mice. The mice they were doing it with was calorie restriction, but someone fed them after 5 days of calorie restriction. And it turned out they regenerated every biomarker that showed less aging by doing that, much better than calorie restriction did. So 5 days a month of 1,000 calories the first day, 750 for the next 4 days. And the soup diet is 36 ounces of diced tomatoes, 12 ounces of corn niblets, 48 ounces of water, onions and spices to taste. You can literally have as much of that as you want the next 4 days, and then you resume a diet without those five things, essentially a Mediterranean diet, and that resets every aging marker we know of. So, and it's pretty simple to do. I've been doing it, whatever it is, either 7, 8, 9 years or 11 years, literally the week it came out. Now, the first test in humans was in graduate students, because they'll do anything. So they did it with bone marrow biopsies and showed it reversed it. They then did it, that was 25 to 30-year-olds. They did it in 35 to 40-year-olds. He then did it in 65 to 70-year-olds. He then did it in 85 to 90-year-olds. It works in every group. It works to prevent cancer recurrences as well. It's a brilliant diet and Walter Longo should be take incredible credit for it, but it really is something that helps you reverse every aging marker.
So
Now,
what do you do?
I'd
What
have to do one more comment on it. On days 4 and 5, you can't do hard exercise. So you have to time it. I do, if you will, cardio and weights 3 days a week, you have to time it. So days 4 and 5 aren't days when you'll do that, because otherwise you'll feel great on doing the first 10 minutes of whatever you're doing, and then it'll be a real struggle. So do those on days 1, 2, and 3 of that program.
and what happens when you get invited to dinner on Wednesday?
I plan I plan the week so that I pick a week when I'm not doing anything other than I can do that. You know, I circle it on the calendar. My wife knows it. I'm not going to travel because it's hard to do when you're traveling to take the soups cans along with you. But other than that, I do it.
Does she do it with you?
Yeah, she's beginning to. I should say, she retired June 30th. She was a division chief at Case Western Reserve. She co-writes the lead book in developmental pediatrics out of Hopkins every year. But she retired in June 30th, and since June 30th, she's picked up all of the aging habits. She decided this was her time to stop aging too.
You and I have spoken about alcohol before, and previously you said there are only five foods that you shouldn't eat because they're doing big damage to you. You've discussed at length the damage that alcohol does to us. Yet you are not somebody who says, don't have a glass of wine. You yourself, from time to time, have a glass of wine. How have you, if you will, managed alcohol intake, and what would your words of advice be to those listening as it relates to how to manage it?
Well, there are two things. You want to enjoy it, and you want to enjoy it with friends. So the difference is every one of the studies didn't take into account the stress relieving benefit of building a posse. So as long as you're not drinking alone, you're doing okay. And as long as you're limiting it to two 5-ounce glasses of wine at a time, you're doing okay. And the data would say at most three or four nights a week, not more than 4 nights a week. And that data shows a slight reduction in all-cause mortality. That's where the red wine effect got its name, but because it does decrease all-cause mortality. Increases aging of your immune system, so increases your risk of cancer a little bit. Increases brain aging, decreases cardiovascular aging. Since most of us die of cardiovascular aging, that's a way you can justify, if you will, doing it. But it is the socialization. It again is building that posse is the most important thing you can do for your whole body, including your brain. And so have that one glass of wine, make it the best wine you can have. That is, do it as a special thing and with special friends. And then I think at least I justify it for myself as okay.
It's interesting. I decided to do a dry January, and then I decided to do a dry February, and I'm on to my dry March now. And one of the things that I'm seeing, Mike, is that my I haven't changed anything other than that, and my what you call it, my aging reversal, if you will, via my Whoop strap, right now after 2 months is starting to accelerate backwards. And it's been pretty static, if you will, for the past couple of years as it relates to my real age by the Whoop strap, not by your test, which people can go online and take your real age test, which I do think this is a great proxy, but I think the real age test that you have people do is actually probably a more specific indicator. But my Whoop age is about 50 and I'm about to turn 59. So I'm about 9 years per my Whoop age younger. But it's interesting because it's starting to go backwards quicker than it was previously. And the one big change that I've had in 2026 is just not drinking.
Yeah, um, the real age test, as you know, I was at the University of Chicago as the chair of a department, and I got to care for seven Nobel Prize winners as head of executive health, and one of them was Gary Becker, who did the net present value of investments. And so, what real age is the net present value of your health choices based on disability and death risks and death rates. And so that still is the most, and so I'm plugging what you said, plugging my own thing. We don't own it anymore, we sold it. But the actual age test, which is the simplified version of it, the real age test is 181 questions and goes into everything. It does the net present value very well. But we sold that in 2006. But Gary Becker worked with me on both that and the actual age test. The actual age test is 35 questions at 4longevity.com, but it has the most accurate receiver operant curves of any of the aging biomarkers. It still is the best at predicting disability and death. So I take a lot of pride in it, but it's really Gary Becker, the net present value work that he did.
Have any life insurance companies tried to implement that to get a forward look on the people they're insuring?
So I can tell you Allstate did a test with it, and Swiss Re, I think, does use it. But Allstate did a test with it way early on, probably in 2001 or two. And the problem they had is when they told patients their real age, they wanted the insurance rates of that age person. Um, and so their premiums, they said if they adopted it full sport would go down. So they decided not to institute it. But a few years later, as I understand, Swiss Re does use it.
It's interesting. Years ago when you and I had spoken, we talked on this topic, and I went and did my real age test, and then I went and looked at my life insurance policy and realized that if I lived as long as it was projecting that I would live, that the life insurance policy would be worthless. And so I actually stopped investing in it. And so the point there is that if heaven forbid I get whacked walking across the street this afternoon, my poor sons aren't going to benefit from the life insurance policy. But if I live as long as I think I'm going to live, I'm glad I'm no longer paying any into those premiums.
No, the interesting thing, I didn't believe this. At 104, it used to be at 104, the life insurance policies became worthless.
Yeah.
They now extended that at many companies to 120. So I think they're going to need one of my great friends who runs Western and Southern Life as the CEO for whatever it is, 35 years of Western and Southern Life, said we should sell more life insurance and less annuities based on this.
Very much so. Um, Sleep is another one of the ones that there's seemingly a book every week on why sleep's so important, and a lot of people have gotten on it and they wear trackers as far as how they're sleeping, and people have made adjustments. Anything new on the sleep front, Mike? Clearly, being in a cold, dark place without a lot of noise and getting to bed early and not looking at your device before you go to bed, and all those things are, I think, pretty well established now. Anything else that has come out recently that is a hack or a tip that you could give to our listeners?
No, I think you said sleep hygiene, which is all those areas, is key. There continue to be attempts at developing supplement and drug regimens. And the one we use commonly is if you're having problems getting to sleep, initially it's magnesium and melatonin 2 hours before bedtime. If you're having trouble getting back to sleep, if you get up to urinate, it is taking those right as you go to sleep and letting those last. And melatonin, as its side effect, if you get a high quality melatonin, and meaning there seems to be some contamination in those made in different countries than the US. But if you get the high quality melatonin, then you can go up to 20 milligrams a night with usually without any adverse side effects and maybe with a benefit. In the association data has a decrease in cancer rates for people who do that. It may be because they sleep better, but whatever it is, there is a benefit from a higher dose melatonin in the literature.
As you're talking about melatonin, Mike, it makes me think about supplements and small molecule procedures and things of that nature that you've written about. Um, and then I would add into that peptides, because peptide seems to be the topic du jour. Talk for a moment about supplements and peptides.
We've been our scientific advisory board at foryoungevity.com. I think it is now 55 supplements and small molecules we've been asked to analyze as routines for people over the age of 50. Of that, 18 now meet the criteria of having more benefit than risk in a substantial way. So I mentioned two of them. The average person over 50 taking a statin and a GLP-1 in low dose for both, even if they don't have the risk factors for them otherwise. But so we look at it carefully, and as I said, I think there are 18 now. Some of them are pretty simple and routine. Vitamin D2 with K2, a multivitamin split in half in the morning, half in the evening to get a stable level. DHA and EPA, 1100 milligrams a day. So, and CoQ10, in addition to the statin, the anti-inflammatory statin, if you will, 200 milligrams a day, are relatively routine. But there are, as I said, there are 18 that fit into that criterion. Now, on peptides, well, the GLP-1 is a peptide, insulin's a peptide. So, you have to say, how about the experimental, or what we say, the peptides that we don't have quite enough data on? And so, if you will, that's the problem. We don't have quite enough data. If you look at NAD or
Yeah.
resveratrol as examples, both of those, every animal study showed benefit, and they have failed every human trial. So humans aren't mice, rats, or guinea pigs, or even cats or dogs. And consequently, we insist on success in the human trials before we would say there's more benefit than risk. So the people who are selling them, we call them wallet biopsiers. That is, they're seeing if your wallet's large enough for them to take a biopsy of it and keep some of it.
That's great. A wallet biopsy. Um, you mentioned previously plasma therapy. Talk about plasma. First of all, what does one do when you go and do that? What happens in the
What
procedure?
and let me give you 3 minutes on the history of it. The history was in the 1930s. One of the major universities was running out of money to support their rat colony. So some investigators, last rites to a couple of the rats, hooked a old rat and a young rat together in what is called parabiosis, and the old rat got younger. That led to some wealthy guys in the 30s hiring some young boys to give them transfusions. The problem, and some of those old guys died because we didn't know enough about blood transfusion immunology and the ABO subtypes. A lot of that came out in World War II. So it fell into disfavor. In the 60s, a two graduate students, Irina and Michael Conboy, started experiments. They rediscovered it, hooked two mice up, and then did experiments with the mice. The old mice ran the mazes faster. The old mice's every tissue looked younger. And then they spent literally 35 years. Other people replicated it, so NIH started funding the studies to say, what is it in young blood that makes the old rat young? After 35 years, they then did an experiment where instead of hooking it with young blood, they just replaced it with saline albumin and the person's or the animal's old red cells, and it did the same thing. Then they did it in humans. So therapeutic plasma exchange is a FDA-approved technology for autoimmune disease. But what it is for therapeutic plasma exchange, you put an IV in one arm that takes the blood out, goes through a centrifuge, cleans it up. You get the red cells, white cells, and platelets back in the other arm, plus albumin and saline. In the AMBAR studies, because the animals ran the mazes better, in 2015 or so, they started a randomized controlled trial, large-scale trial, incredibly well done, and it with people with early Alzheimer's, it reversed it. You know, the monoclonal antibodies between 12 and 22% effect. The therapeutic plasma exchange, 71% effect in this randomized controlled trial. How good was it? Well, they put the IVs in the placebo group too, and then they wrapped it with aluminum foil, ran it behind a curtain, and ran the machine. So perfectly done placebo group. The placebo group, unfortunately, continued to deteriorate. That's now been repeated in an Argentinian study, not as well done. The people were their own controls, but every one of the 9 characteristics of cognitive function improved. So now, as of yesterday, there is a test that predicts when and if you'll get Alzheimer's disease. It just came out of the large group on biomarkers for Alzheimer's. You don't have to do a PET scan, you don't have to do spinal tap. Blood test can predict within 4 years of when you'll develop it. And with that 4-year time frame, you can say, well, I'm going to get therapeutic plasma exchange in this field, or just I'm going to get younger. Therapeutic plasma exchange in the aging studies done at the Buck Institute. Still with the Conboys. The Conboys are 80, I think, still working, Irina and Michael, and they keep one's at Stanford, one's at UC Berkeley. They're wonderful researchers, and they combined with the Buck Institute to look at this as aging biomarkers. It reversed, or it made the humans biomarkers about 2.6 years younger on average, between 1 year older and 3.6 years younger. And the muscle biopsies done in 8 of the people look about 8 years younger. So you can tell that the tissue by the density of energy producing organelles and the garbage organelles that are in the cell, and you get fewer of those after you go through this. So looks like it reverses aging, as well as long COVID, as well as the dementia, and virtually no side effects. Yeah, you can get an infection anytime IVs are placed, etc.
And do you need to have any conditions to go get it, or could I go get a therapeutic plasma exchange tomorrow?
I invested in this company so that does it. I'll tell you what happened. I read the study, and it came out in abstract form in 2019. I had a patient who literally couldn't say 2 words together, early Alzheimer's. I called the guy at the Cleveland Clinic. It was done 2 centers at 2 centers in Spain, 2 in Chile, 6 in the United States. Cleveland Clinic was one of them. I called around our head of our brain, says, I don't know, I don't think we're doing this. I called, if you will, the 3 brain centers at the Cleveland Clinic. None of them thought it was doing it. I finally called the PR agent for the brain center. Each of the institutes at the Cleveland Clinic is big enough. It had a PR agent. I called him, and after a week, he found out that it was Babak Tusi. I called Babak. I said, will you do this? He said, no, I'm not doing it anymore. I moved on to monoclonal antibodies. And so I called the Mayo Clinic. I called the University of Pittsburgh, nobody would do it for this indication. So I helped start a company, if you will, called lifespan-edge.com that does this. And in fact, confession, I've just had my fourth treatment myself. Not because I have
Ah,
any not because I have any risk factors, but because it also decreases the biomarkers of aging.
you may have a new patient very soon. Um, let's touch on exercise because you're both very dedicated to it, and you mentioned previously, Mike, about jumping. One of the other things I took from Atia's book Outlive was the farmer's walk, and that if you can carry your weight at 70 years old in a farmer's walk of two dumbbells that equal your weight, that is a marker of longevity, is like an incredible early indicator, if you will, of being able to live a long and healthy life. It makes perfect sense. Grip strength, being able to lift heavy things, getting in and out of bed, getting up and down stairs, all that kind of stuff, all correlates well. Um, Anything new on the exercise front, Mike, beyond the 3 days a week that you mentioned previously, the jumping that you've mentioned? I just mentioned the farmer's walk as being a really good indicator of longevity when you cross the 70-year-old threshold. Anything else?
No, I think a lot of it is data. The best data we have is from the Harvard and the Penn alumni studies. And there are three components that make a difference, um, plus jumping. So fourth component is jumping. They are any, which is 10,000 steps a day, still is in the 23 studies that have been done, it's still 10,000 steps a day for less disability and the least all-cause mortality. It is 21 minutes, 3 times a week of cardio at 80+% of your age-adjusted maximum heart rate. Age-adjusted max is 220 minus your age, times 80% is what you want to do it. And then the new data is the last 2 minutes. You really want to go all out and see if you can get to 100%. It's called high intensity interval training in that last 2 minutes of the 21 minutes. And then it is resistance exercise. An easy way of doing that, if you want, is every even day of the month, you get an extra day off at the end of the month. But it is literally those three plus 20 jumps morning and night on a hard surface.
And Mike, do you track your VO2 max?
I do it every couple of years, so I don't track it routinely. But mine. This is ridiculous. I'm 80 and it's 55. So I have no idea why it has been that way. Whether it's because I've kept the training up, or whether it's my genes allowed me to keep the training and keep it there. But it's a ridiculous. It's a very high number for someone my age.
It's an extremely high number for someone your age. Um, do you think are you pretty consistent as it relates to that max effort at the end of your cardio exercises to try and keep that up there? Because one of the big differentiators on maintaining VO2 max, to my understanding of it, is getting on a stationary bike for half an hour, 40 minutes is great and good and very helpful for both controlling weight and just getting your cardiovascular system running. But it doesn't help you much on that VO2 max unless you're pushing yourself to the extreme.
I push myself to the extreme 3 times a week.
Yeah.
My last 2 minutes of, whether it's a Schwinn bike or a elliptical or a rowing machine, the last 2 minutes, and I try and alternate a little bit and have have a little gym at home and a little gym in a second home. And so I don't go any place. I won't go to a hotel without a gym. And so routinely I will do the last 2 minutes as high as I can. And I can tell you, after I got repair of my shoulder, I did something you should never do, and I can tell that is don't skip the warm up. So I was late. I didn't have enough time, so I did bench press without the warm up, and I tore my rotator cuff. Then I took 6 weeks, if you will, it was 6 months of rehab, and I wasn't able to do the hit during that time. And so I my heart rate went from a max of about 172. This is just a few years ago, so it's still when I was in the 70s, down to about 148, and I've gradually built it up to 166. So I'm still over, if you will, at 80, it should be 140, right? But I can get it up to 166. So
And where's your resting heart rate these days?
it's about 46.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but anyway, but so
Doesn't surprise me.
but
And
so I'm a true believer in exercise for stress relief and as well as for maintaining your rate of aging. The data are pretty good. Stress management is number one, nutrition is two, and physical activity is three for those without chronic disease yet.
I got I went to the airport this morning with two colleagues of mine in New York, and they came to pick me up at my hotel. And I stay at the Equinox Hotel on the west side in Hudson Yards. And one of my colleagues said, "Why do you stay over here?" Because our office is in Midtown at One Vanderbilt. And I said, "It's real simple. It's got an incredible Equinox gym on the fourth floor, and that's very important to me. Second of all, they have blackout shades in every room, and so I get a good night's sleep because of the blackout shades. The rooms are built like fortresses, so you don't hear anybody in a room next to you. And they have thermostats that allow you to control the temperature instantaneously, where you can take it from 72 of sort of living temperature to 68 for sleep temperature, and off you go to sleep." And my friend turned to me and he goes, "That's the most concise kind of reasoning I've ever heard on why you'd stay at a hotel." And I said, that's their model. And I said, other hotels have a great lobby bar where you hang out and see lots of people and have a good drink. And that's just not what I'm looking for in a hotel. But next time you and I are in New York together, maybe I'll get you to come stay at the Equinox with me.
Sounds like a very good plan. Thank you.
Mike, it's always great to see you. Your insights on longevity and health and all that are just, they're so practical, they're so real, they're so grounded in research, they're so grounded in your own life and your own experience. And I'm just deeply thankful that you came back on again. And I look forward to our next conversation when you've got new research and new ideas to share with everybody.
Within 5 years, we're going to know whether you and I can be 40 again.
I look forward to it. Something tells me you're going to beat me on that race. But I'd love to be in the race with you. Mike, I have a great day. I'll say hi to Peter for you tomorrow, and have a great one. Really appreciate you spending the time.
My privilege. Thank you very much.